Hello, welcome in. We are going to be talking about the ego today and defensiveness and what happens when you spiritually evolve. So, I'm going to be reading to you from this little beautiful book called The Christ Letters, which I'm sure you know all about because you're here on my channel. So, what we're talking about is electromagnetism and defensiveness that can come. So if there was a conflict or something that got brought up, depending on how you react or depending on how you respond to whatever it is that is being presented to you, is going to not only affect you right then in that moment, but through electromagnetism, however you're responding is essentially going to come back to you again here in the future. So I am reading, if you happen to have the book, on page 128. So we were talking about repulsion, because when we're repulsing, when we're pushing, when we're putting something away, it's the ego that is doing that every single time, and it is not beneficial to us. So unpleasantness may be criticism from your parents, teachers, employer, or the words of self-defense which spring to mind and jump out of your mouth and are ego words wholly given to self-defense, expressing the magnetic drive of repulsion and rejection. So if somebody brings something to you, we can use our words and we will repulse and reject what it is that they're saying, but it's always the ego. It's always the ego that is doing this. And so as your ego words of attack flare up into anger speech, so is the ego of your critic similarly threatened, and it also rises up in him or her as words of self-defense against you. So if somebody brings something up and you start attacking them, they're going to start attacking you. So what may have started out as a necessary adult action of pointing out some error and a better way to do something is frequently immediately seen by a self-centered, sensitive ego as a personal attack. What should have been a moment of growth develops into a time of conflict, anger, possibly tears, ongoing resentment, and mutual hostility. In such swift, unexpected, unnecessary ways, conflict is generated in the mind, expressed in words, even actions, and perpetuated through resentment and hatred. Remember that every activity of the mind, the mental thought and the emotional reactions of attraction and repulsion, are all consciousness energies of creativity. These consciousness energies not only create the unpleasant rebound forms, but they develop the direction of the character and even affect relationships generally and the environment as they reduce the life of vitality in the body, leading directly to a sense of physical malaise, viral infection, or long-term disease. Anytime that we harbor any kind of resentment, anytime that we harbor anything in our body that is not loving consciousness, it will lower the vitality in our body. So what do you do if you are dealing with someone who is so ego-based that they will not accept your loving direction? I guess my advice is don't deal with them. I'm just kidding. I actually don't know what to do in this case. So this is why I'm telling you, don't deal with them, because that's what I would do. But what we're talking about here is how to get this ego under control. So if you feel like you get really defensive when somebody brings something up, this is because there is unhealed things within you that are being triggered. So these unhealed things are just something that has not completed the circuit yet. Let me give you an example. Let's say that somebody has harmed you in some way and you're really resentful. So an uncompleted circuit would look like all this emotional, all this thought, all this belief, all this maybe even action or whatever, but you've never actually spoken it and you've never said it. And therefore the circuit's not complete, and therefore it feels open and it feels stressful because you didn't finish that thing that needs to be finished. But what can happen when, let's say that we're in a relationship and the person that we're with is not healed, so they're very operating out of their ego. If this is the case, you could bring something up to them and you could be very gentle, bringing it up, and they might think that you're trying to be superior to them, like, oh, because you're calm and you're bringing this across in a certain way, and they may, oh, you just think you're better than me. If they're saying this is their ego operating. Their soul doesn't think that. Their soul knows, but their ego might be trying to defend them. And so what do you do when you have a situation like this, that you genuinely want something really good for someone, let's say it's your sister, and you see your sister and she has terrible relationship after terrible relationship, and you know exactly why it's happening. Because, she maybe doesn't believe in herself, she doesn't love herself enough, and so she keeps seeking out the same type of people who are going to cause the same kind of damage to her over and over and over again. But if you were to point this out to her, she'll, attack you and be like, oh, well, you just have this. And the person then makes whatever you brought up something now about you, because they don't want to look at this beautiful, nice, kind advice that you're giving to them, and they want to just attack. And so when this happens, what we need to do as people who are not responding, not reacting, not going on the attack, is to just maintain. Just maintain your mastery. And if they start attacking you and calling you names, or they think that you're superior, you very well know that you're not superior. You've just worked through things, and you're just really at a different level, at a different place. And I'm not saying that you're above them, but you're just actually not resonating at the same level as a person who is still really in their ego and going to attack. And so, because the ego is here to protect us, it really is. I mean, we're all born with one. It's here to protect us. Because it's here to protect us, sometimes it can be difficult to remove and let go of the ego, because we have identified a part of ourself as something specific. And so if that specific thing is being threatened, perceivably, or being attacked, we identify that thing as us, when it's really actually something that is separate from us. So let me give you an example here. So in high school, I would have been hanging out with and would have been considered, like a skater, right? Like that would have been that's weird to think about. That would have been where I was at back then. And so at that time, I would have identified myself in that world, right? These are the people I hang out with. This is how I dress. This is where we hang out. This is what we do. I identified myself as that particular thing. Okay, so then I finish school and I leave there and I go to beauty school. Well, what happens when you go to beauty school? And previously I was, a skater type chick. Okay, well now things are totally different, right? So now I'm going to beauty school. Well, now I'm dressing differently, I'm acting differently, and I'm no longer identifying with that old version of myself. This is why we don't identify with those old versions of ourselves, because every version that we're playing is essentially a mask, a role. It's not who we really are until we figure out who we really are. And most of us as teenagers or young adults, we don't know who we are. We think we do, right? And when I was a teenager, I thought, oh, I'm a skater, right? And then we finish, okay, well, now I think I'm this. Okay, well, then now I have my children. Okay, well, now I'm this. And we continue to identify ourselves by how we dress, who we hang out with, what job we have, all these things. And all of these things are completely ego. They are all ego, and they could change at any given moment. And therefore, they're not actually who we are. They're just the character that we happen to be playing at that particular minute of our life. And so when we can understand that who we are is totally not all of these characters that we've been playing, and that we've never been any of these characters that we're playing, we were literally just playing that character, and that who we are was actually this powerful spiritual being underneath here. When we get to this point, then when someone brings something up to us like, hey, this really bothers me when you do this, the old version of us may have attacked and be like, oh yeah, well, you do this and you do this and you do this and blah, 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 blah. Whereas this new version of us, who has healed our ego parts, is going to take that information and they're going to take it seriously, and they're going to consider it, and they're going to think, is that for me? Is that not for me? They're not going to take it personally. They're not going to take it as a personal attack. They're going to ingest the information that they get in a very different way than you digest it when your ego is the one in charge, because the ego is like, I need to defend, I need to reject, I need to repulse, I need to and it's almost on high alert. But when you've healed the ego, you're no longer on high alert. And if someone was to kind of say anything to you, you just be like, oh, okay. And you You actually don't even have much of an emotional reaction to really anything anymore, because you've now gone into more of an observer role rather than being so invested in the character that you're playing. You're more kind of observing what's going on. And so I tell you that to tell you this. If you're dealing with someone who gets extremely defensive and they are really living out of their ego, don't take it personally, because it's actually about that person. And if they don't want to look at certain areas of their life and they don't want to admit to certain things, totally cool, man. That's their life. Let them do it. But don't take it personal, and don't feel like if this person, let's say you brought something up and that person's like, oh, you think you're superior, or oh, you whatever. Don't take that personal either, because you know your heart, right? You know your heart, you know your soul, you know your mind. And if you were genuinely, gently bringing something to someone for the betterment of all, you know that too, right? You know where your heart resonates. But if someone doesn't receive it well, okay, well, you can change your messaging. You can change the words that you use. You can, try to accommodate as much as possible to, somewhat placate people's egos if that's what they need, so that you aren't on the receiving end of an attack. But I'm telling you this because you can't change people. You can't change them. You can easily, though, decide for yourself whether you want to accept their behavior in your life or not. And you may get to a place in your life where you get sick of having to explain yourself, and you get sick of being misunderstood. And at that point, you then can determine whether or not you need to let go of certain relationships to make room for new ones or not. Now, I know this ego topic, it's some people, they just don't know. They just don't know what their ego is, and it is kind of a difficult thing to explain. But I will say that it is the thing that wants to defend you, and it is the thing that wants to go after and attack, and it is the thing that rejects and that doesn't like things. That is what your ego does. And so how would you respond if somebody brought up an issue to you, like let's say that they say you talk too much or something like that, and it was like a genuine issue, and someone brings this up to you and they're like, hey, I don't want to insult you, I don't want to anything, I've just observed that maybe you talk a little bit more, and that maybe your words would be a whole lot more powerful if you used less words, if you talked less and you just had more power punch in the words that you're saying. I think that it would be more well received. How would you receive a message like that if it was coming to you? Would you be like, you talk too much, you whatever, look at yourself? Well, how would you respond in that situation? This can let you know where your ego's at. And of course, this is, one topic. I'm just giving you one example, but how would you respond if someone gently, because I was pretty gentle there, presented you with an issue? How would you respond to that? This is where you can know where your ego's at, right? Because someone brings that issue to you, maybe that doesn't pertain to you at all, and they're literally projecting, and they're the one that talks all the time, and it has nothing to do with you. Totally cool. So you could then take that information and you could say, oh, thank you. I'm just wondering, because I actually don't believe that I do talk too much. If maybe this is more about you than it is about me. And you could calmly and gently bring something like that up. Okay, if it's not about you, but let's say that they bring it to you and it is about you. So you take it in and you might think, oh, you know what? I've been kind of thinking the same thing too. This is something I've actually actively been working on. So thank you for pointing that out. Or maybe they bring it to you and you're like, oh, okay, thanks. I've never considered this, but because you're bringing it to me, it must be a genuine issue. So thank you for bringing this up, and I'm going to consider this, and I'm going to think about it for a bit. Now, wouldn't it be nice If when you brought an issue up to somebody, that was how they responded, just being thoughtful rather than going on the attack, this is what you can do for people when you heal the ego. And when you really deeply resonate with and are embodying the spirit that you are, then anybody could bring kind of anything to you, and you're not going to feel like this is attack on self. You're going to feel differently about it. So this is a way to know, how many ego layers have I worked through, and to know if there is still work. And if there's still work, cool, you're alive. But you might have work until you die. We might all have work until we die, and I hope we do, because if we're not evolving, right, we're dying. So it makes sense that we would continue to evolve. But this is just a good way to be able to kind of test, where am I at on healing my ego? Because if someone was to, give me some constructive criticism, how would I take that? Would I be pissed? Would I be defensive? Would I want to go back and attack them? Then you're in your ego. But if someone gave you some constructive criticism, and you just gently took it and you became the observer and you looked at it and thought and kind of examined it, but without the emotion, and just kind of like looking at it genuinely, then you know that you have, removed your ego from the situation, and that you're really looking at what is best for all. So anyways, that's the little lesson that I have for you guys here today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Love you all so much, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.